Everybody. So today we are talking about building emotional intelligence and resilience with Estella Rodriguez Jabril, who is a provider on Faith Consulting. She is a therapist and sex coach. So she is going to be joining us today to talk about this topic. And connect. I think it's connect. Assalamu alaikum. Oh, can't hear you.
Now, can you can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but you sound super, super far away.
Let's see. I was just having some technical difficulties and trying to set myself up. I don't know what might be going on. How about now?
Okay, I think that should be okay. Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, definitely. I think everybody can hear, right? Ramadan Mubarak, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. Ramadan Mubarak. How's Ramadan going for you?
It's super easy for us. We're in Qatar. We break our fast at like 5:45. The weather is so nice. Like it's been a breeze this time.
That's wonderful. Alhamdulillah. This Ramadan has been so lovely as well. Alhamdulillah. It's just been a gift and I'm so grateful. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, that's great. I'm glad we got to experience Ramadan once again, basically.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay. I've introduced the topic and yourself. So we're talking today about building resilience and emotional intelligence. You're a therapist and sex coach, and you have a bunch of programs online as well. If people don't really need to have that one-on-one, but they have like kind of a set program that they can go through, which is really incredible. I was thinking about that today. If only someone can do like a set program for these kind of things so that you can just go through it with yourself and do that self-reflection in your own time. So that's really incredible. Maybe you can give us a little background about yourself and a little background on the topic as well so we know what we'll be talking about today.
Thank you for inviting me, first of all. Alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful to be here. And yes, we're talking about resiliency, how to get through hardships, right? How to grow through hardships, and emotional intelligence, how to really understand our emotions and how to navigate through our emotions. And I'm a licensed clinical therapist and a sex coach, and I've been working with women and couples for over 10 years now, and it's just an honor. And I'm working with so many young couples these days and so many young individuals, and I'm really honored that I get to share what I've learned and what I've experienced myself. And it's just such a beautiful opportunity always to be able to learn from our experiences and become more resilient and learn how to navigate through our emotions in a healthy way.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so thank you for that background. How would you define resilience and how would you define emotional intelligence?
Well, resiliency is really just about being able to build our skills to endure hardship. And resilience is able to adapt to life's misfortunes and setbacks and not stay down, to be able to learn from them and grow from them and evolve from them. And emotional intelligence is about learning how to identify and manage our own emotions so that we don't react, and so that we also don't react to other people's emotions.
Interesting. Okay. I could see this being really useful in so many different facets of life, whether it's with family, with friends, with your loved ones, at work. And I love what you said about building skills to deal with life's misfortunes, because I think sometimes, I don't know, sometimes religiously speaking, people give you the advice of just like tawakkul, which is great. but it also doesn't sometimes solve the issue at hand, which is not having the skill set to get through a situation or the resources or whatever it might be. So that's a really interesting way of defining resilience.
Yes, of course we have to have tawakkul. Of course we have to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's first and foremost. And we also have a responsibility to improve how we grow and how we evolve. And it really starts by connecting, understanding how to get connected, understanding how to build healthy and positive relationships. We take relationships for granted, especially those closest to us, as a parent, you know, as a husband, as a wife, even as a child. It's so important to be able to experience, you know, meaningful relationships. And in order to do that, you have to understand how to connect and how to learn from your experiences. And of course, how to remain hopeful. And what's interesting is that it always comes back to us, how we are ourselves learning from our own reactions and our own triggers, and understanding those wounds that we've experienced in life and learning how to let go. Let go is all about forgiveness, and forgiveness is never about the other person. Forgiveness is for us to be able to recognize, okay, how do I need to take care of myself? How do I need to set boundaries so that I can have a deep and meaningful relationship, even if that relationship is not perfect? Of course, the relationships that are the toughest are with loved ones. We don't pick who our parents are. We don't pick who our siblings are. And we don't, you know, pick who our children are. So we have to remain hopeful and work on ourselves and take responsibility for ourselves in order to build, in order to cultivate that emotional intelligence so that we can be proactive.
Interesting. And so, like, what are the steps that you take with somebody in order to achieve the skill sets needed to overcome these situations? Like, if someone came in and they didn't have the resources or skill or resilience, what steps do you take from the beginning to get to that point of being able to deal with the situation that they're in?
I really start with the basics. Do you even understand what your top core values are? You have to understand what's important to you, what is beneficial for you, what is meaningful for you. If you don't know, there are so many values in life. And if you don't know what your top 5 values are, then you're going to struggle, because you're going to be out of integrity with yourself and you're going to be out of integrity with others. So I really start with the basics of understanding what's important for you. Do you even know what it is? I take my clients through a process of understanding their 5 top core values by looking at all the values that are important in life and narrowing down to the top 5. And those will change as we go through life. Throughout our different stages of life, they will change. Some will stay the same, but we can only live by the top 5 core values. So we have to understand them. We have to know what it feels like and what it looks like to be in integrity with those core values. So first and foremost, we can hold ourselves accountable, and then we can see the red flags in relationships, and then we can communicate in a healthy way to resolve whatever hardships are coming up in those relationships.
Interesting. Okay. So knowing yourself essentially and what your own values are before you address external situations is really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And so then as far as emotional intelligence, how do you build that skill set up? Like, what are the steps that one would take in order to build up better emotional intelligence?
You have to look at how you react, how you respond. If you're not aware of your reactions to others, then you're going to be living from your triggers. Okay. So you have to be willing to slow down and reflect and write down you know, we hear a lot about journaling. So taking the time to write down your experiences and your emotions, you can understand what is happening and what needs attention, most importantly. So it starts with giving yourself space, reflecting, and slowing down.
That's really interesting because I always thought emotional intelligence was always about understanding other people's emotions and never thought about it as understanding your own emotions and being intelligent in the way that you perceive your own self and the way you react to things. So I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, it's so important to understand yourself. If you don't understand yourself, how are you going to be emotionally intelligent? You're not going to be able to identify and manage those emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You have to practice observing yourself. You know, how do you feel? What's going on with your children? What's going on at work? You know, so that you can pay attention to how you're behaving, so that you can question your own opinions, so that you can take responsibility for your feelings and your emotions.
Interesting. Before, I guess, before accusing someone else of being a certain way.
Yes, 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 absolutely, absolutely. You can only hold others accountable if you're willing to hold yourself accountable. And if you're willing to hold yourself accountable, you're going to have a higher level of self-respect. And when you really have that higher level of self-respect where you'll receive that respect from others. And it doesn't mean that things will be perfect, but you'll build a more deep and meaningful connection with those engaging with.
Interesting. Okay. So what are some examples of people who weren't very good at resilient or at being resilient in a certain situation, or weren't very good at understanding their own emotions and how that's impacted their relationships, or the relationships they have at work, or the dynamics that they have in their lives with other people?
I mean, one of the most common is in our marriages. You know, as women, we're so different than men. And when we don't take the time to really understand what it is that we need, what it is that we want, then we're going to react. If husbands have, this is why in my Love, Sex, and Marriage, I really teach women how to understand the way that men think, because they think so differently than we do. You know, we're more emotional, of course. It's not that we can't be rational, but you know, when you're in a marriage and you know your husband comes home and he's quiet and he's not giving you attention, as women we tend to think like, he doesn't love me, what's wrong with me, you know, and then we go and we spiral into this false, you know, perception of what's really going on, when he may have, you know, been just yelled at by his boss, or maybe he was, you know, in an argument, or a project didn't go well. So this is why it's so important to really understand how to regulate ourselves, so that when we're engaging with others and there's misunderstandings and there's, you know, we don't understand really what's going on with the other individual, we have to first be able to recognize that if we are taking care of ourselves, we're going to gain more insight. We're going to be more empathetic and more compassionate.
Interesting. Okay, that is a good example. So okay, so because sometimes I feel when we talk about things like this, people don't recognize it in themselves. Like they think that they're emotionally intelligent, or they think that they, you know, have built up a good resilience, but in reality they haven't, and there's symptoms of that, right? And so I guess the question is like, what are the symptoms of someone not having these things built up in them, and that, you know, maybe it's something that they need to work on?
So if you're struggling with your emotions and you're struggling with your feelings and you're reacting to others, one of the common symptoms is to blame and complain. When we start blaming and complaining, that's a clear indication that we're pointing out to all the external and we're not recognizing what it is that we have access to, what we can change within ourselves. Another example is, there's so many, and it's early here for me, so I apologize.
Yeah. Blaming and complaining, though, is a really good one because you see that all the time. And sometimes I'm like, okay, this person doesn't have a good sense of holding themselves accountable. But then at the same time, there are times where I'm just like, no, they're within their rights to complain or blame or whatever because something happened to them that was like a direct assault or insult. And it's just hard to distinguish between when they're right, they do, something's happened where they should be blaming someone or they should be complaining, and when it's just like overboard. And then there are people that I feel like they blame and complain all the time in any situation. Doesn't matter what happens, it's someone else's fault. And that is like a super clear sign that there's just no sense of accountability.
But even if it is somebody else's fault, blaming it is never going to get us to the solution or to a resolution. And it's so important to be able to cultivate that emotional intelligence so we can be empathetic and compassionate towards others. Of course, we will not tolerate, and we should not tolerate, physical abuse, verbal abuse, any type of abuse. Those are red flags that always show up ahead of time that we don't see because we're not ourselves at that level of really understanding what it is that we should be looking for. It's so important to really distinguish between being proactive and active, because when we're reactive, we're going to complain, we're going to blame others, and we're not going to elevate our responsibility. And that's where all the opportunities are.
That's such an excellent point. I remember in my last workplace, we had this, something just kept on reoccurring, and I just kept thinking, why does this keep happening? And it was something like negative between the team members, basically. And then I realized, okay, it's a lack of communication between the teams. And so one person is blaming the other person for not doing something, and the other person's like, well, why isn't she doing it? And it was that kind of dynamic. And then I realized, okay, it seems that everyone thinks that the other person is responsible for something that they're not, or that that they're not doing as much work as them. So in that case, what we started doing is just like team meetings, a lot of updates by email, and just opening all of those communication channels to make sure that everybody is communicating and they understand the roles of each other and they understand how much work is being put in by each department so that they didn't run into those same problems again. And you're right. I mean, we could have just kept going like that forever and everyone just complaining and blaming endlessly. But yeah, once you stop to think, okay, well, why is this happening? You're right. You can reach some really important resolutions.
Yes. And that is the dynamic that happens in so many places of work, right? And it's, it's never about I'm right, so therefore, I have more leverage. No, when you can leverage empathy and compassion, we bring out the best in others. And that really is the goal, to bring out the best in ourselves. So then we can bring out the best in others. And then collaboration is amazing at every level within the parent-child relationship. And yes, absolutely in the workplace. How much more efficient can we be if we're empathetic and compassionate towards each other, where, you look at the problems are going to show up. Problems are inevitable, but when you can step back and recognize that, okay, I can take an approach of being really empathetic and compassionate. The energy from that is priceless. You really engage at a different level.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So do you mind if I ask you like a scenario situation? Because I've seen this happen a couple of times with different people. And I just wonder, I feel like it has a lot to do with emotional intelligence, but I'm not entirely sure what the solution is. So in a relationship, I feel like sometimes you want to address a concern because you see there's an issue and you've thought about it and you think, okay, well, if I can just talk to this person about it, they may open up and say, well, okay, this is my perspective. But oftentimes you bring up something and the other person just completely shuts down and says, you know what? I don't know why you're talking about this. You're picking on something, or you're too sensitive, or whatever it might be. Especially between females and males, I feel like this dynamic happens a lot. How do you deal with that situation? Because especially when it's like a marriage or a family member, like you said, you can't get out of that situation, and you do need your needs addressed as well. How do you resolve
You
that?
need one tool.
Okay.
Is called an I statement. And everybody thinks they know how to communicate from I statements. You talk about your feelings, I feel, right? But there's so much more to that format. And it's not a difficult format, and it is difficult to implement. The format is I feel when you, because. This is the format that will always allow for an elevation of responsibility from a place of empathy and compassion from both sides, giving it,
Right.
asking for it. So, for example, when somebody's angry,
Yeah.
usually we respond, when somebody's late, for example, is what I meant to say, and you get angry. I'm a punctual person. I used to get really angry when people weren't on time. And when you're a punctual person and people are late, it's really upsetting. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
angry when you're late. Why are you always late? Right? The person's going to get defensive when you speak from you, when you're pointing your finger. You did
Mm-hmm.
this. And it may be 100% true. But when you say, I feel frustrated when you're late, because it makes me feel like you don't care about me or my time or what I have going on in my day. It
Mm-hmm.
lands completely different. I've seen this time and time again, not only in my own relationship, not only in my own conversations, but in working with others, and especially in marriages and even at the workplace. I work right now. A lot of my clients are having, issues at work, vocational issues, right? And being able to talk to your boss, who you might be a little bit afraid of, and to say, I feel frustrated when you yell at me because I've made a mistake, because it makes me feel disrespected. And to be able to say that allows for reflection, most importantly, a high level of reflection with a high level of integrity, because as human beings, we don't want to harm people. We don't want to harm each other. We really don't. When you get to the basic levels of humanity, everyone's trying to do the best they can with what they have access to.
Yeah.
And I always tell my parents, especially, teach your kids how to communicate using clear I statements. Hold you accountable. As kids is, they're going to hold you accountable, and you're going to create depth and meaning. So using this simple format, I feel when you, because I feel frustrated when you're always late, because it makes me feel like my time isn't important, and it makes me feel like you don't care. It's going to completely change the energy and allow for depth, meaning, and vulnerability to feel safe.
Interesting. So the issue with the first scenario is that the person receiving the criticism doesn't feel safe, or doesn't feel like they can contribute to that discussion. It's more like they're blaming me, this is a me problem, and I have to like somehow go off and fix it.
What does somebody want to do when they're being attacked? They want to protect themselves. They want to defend themselves. It's an instinct. But so being able, shifting the language, shifting the approach will shift the energy and will elevate the ability for accountability.
Brilliant. That is brilliant. Okay. I don't have any more questions from my end, but is there anything else you want to add on this topic?
Well, I mean, there's so much to learn, and why I want to invite all of you that are listening to go into my Instagram profile and get all of my free options that I have. 9 steps to forgiveness. Learning how to recognize your own triggers through body wisdom. I have so many free options, and the link is in my Instagram profile. I don't know if you're going to make it available. Start by educating yourself and looking for the resources that really resonate with you, and the hardest thing is to implement. People give up. It didn't work the first time. Nothing the first time. Change takes time and patience. Allah reward us for our patience. So
someone has a question here. When I use I statements, I'm told that I'm not being direct, and it frustrates my partner even more.
Well, most likely it's not being used correctly. So this is why I want you to write down this format. I feel because I feel, you're talking about the feelings that you're feeling. When you're addressing the behavior first by taking accountability, because you're talking about the results, the outcome. So it has to encompass all of these pieces in order for it to be clear, in order for it to land, in order for it to be received, and for that possibility for growth to happen. It's a simple statement, and you have to follow the whole statement, the whole format. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Do you think it's important also to talk about steps that can be taken for either the thing to not happen again, or, I don't know, for example, so I feel, because you did this, and that makes me feel that way but also these are the things I think that we can do in order for it to not happen again, or I don't know. Do you think that helps?
It depends on who you're talking to. If a wife is talking to her husband, the husband's going to feel like his mother is talking to him, and no man wants to be married to his mother. If it's a husband talking to his wife, she's going to feel like her father's talking to her. No woman wants to be married to her father. That's a parent-child way of addressing things. When you are adults and you're using I statements, you yourself are going to recognize, yeah, you're right. This is what I should do. These are the steps that I can take. When you start dictating from an adult to an adult, that defensiveness is going to kick in. It's like, who are you to tell me what to do? It has to come internally, and it will.
Right.
It will.
Right.
As you become more emotionally intelligent, as you I statements to hold yourself accountable and become more responsible in your language, the natural result is that people will hold themselves accountable and will recognize. And I'll tell you a personal story. As a therapist, I've been married for 34 years. It's going to be 35 years this year, alhamdulillah. And in my 35 years of marriage, I always tell people I filed for divorce 4 times. And alhamdulillah, always an opportunity. And I myself had that tendency, because yes, it's never about being right. Never about saying, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, everything will be better. Yeah. It's about taking accountability. And when I could finally really implement what I preach, what I teach, I can tell you that it was life transforming. And I wasn't implementing those pieces. And I share this story because just because I'm a professional doesn't mean I'm perfect.
Yeah.
And it takes time, and it takes going through hardship. And this is why resiliency builds that inner strength that we don't give up.
Mm.
And I can literally say in the last 5 years, I have probably apologized more genuinely to my husband than I ever did in the previous years of our marriage.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. Okay, interesting. So I think it's using that statement correctly, but also not giving up so quickly.
Yeah.
I think it takes time for someone to get used to um, just a new way of communication, maybe.
It takes time, it takes practice, and it takes vulnerability. We have
Mm.
we have to be willing to always come back and look internally
Yeah.
for that to happen externally. And it
Yeah.
will. And that's why, I'm offering now these programs online. I used to teach them live. I'm no longer teaching a lot of programs live. Actually, I'm not teaching any programs live, but all of the women that have gone through these, their lives have literally transformed. And it's not because I'm special, but it's because I was able to put together information from, psychology as well as our faith to elevate our self-accountability
Mm-hmm.
so that we create influence. That's where it's magical. You begin to plant the seeds that will influence and impact, and then you will see the results and experience the change. So my Passionate Muslim Academy course is a course that's available to brothers and sisters. And it's, I taught it to women. So the language is towards women, but it's for whoever wants to go in there. And my Love, Sex, and Marriage is for women. We have to learn to really utilize language and leverage it a way that serves us, enhances us, brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what does that mean? That we then have the skill set and the resiliency to get to that place of ease, inshallah.
I love that it's like a comprehensive intersection between faith and science and just even faith consulting. I mean, that's what it's about. It's about finding that like beautiful combination of the two, because faith alone sometimes is not enough for what people are going through, and science alone sometimes also is not enough. And it's this combination, I think, that you're right, is magical. And so I'm really, really excited for you with these programs.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am so honored to be here. I'm actually going to be in Doha at the end of the year, and I'm like, we should connect and do something live there.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Please, like, email me well before you come, or message me or whatever, so that we can maybe do something together, maybe run a program here. I mean, who knows?
I would love to. I would love to. Thank you for inviting me. Alhamdulillah. I'm so honored and grateful to be here.
Thank you. And Ramadan Kareem, I hope you have a good rest of the day fasting. And inshallah, we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Take care. Ramadan Kareem. And we'll, inshallah, bring in Eid and celebrate as a community, inshallah.
Yes. And assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.